Imagine a hero, a real-life superhero, but instead of a cape, he wore the uniform of the United States Marine Corps. This is Sergeant Marcus Johnson. He wasn't just any Marine, he was a sniper, a marksman with nerves of steel and a dedication to his country that burned brighter than any star. He had served multiple tours overseas, protecting freedom and facing danger head-on. His medals gleamed with honor, each one a testament to his bravery and skill. Back home, Sergeant Johnson was a pillar of his community. He volunteered at the local youth center, mentoring kids and sharing his experiences. Everyone looked up to him. He was the kind of guy who would give you the shirt off his back, always ready with a helping hand or a word of encouragement. His reputation preceded him. People knew him as a calm, collected, and highly respected individual. He was the last person you'd expect to find in handcuffs. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and Sergeant Johnson's was about to take a sharp, unexpected turn. This story isn't just about one Marine, it's about justice, prejudice, and the extraordinary lengths some people will go to when one of their own is wronged. It's a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. It all starts with a seemingly ordinary day that quickly spiraled out of control. The day started like any other. Sergeant Johnson decided to run a few errands. He needed to pick up groceries for dinner and grab a new basketball for the kids at the youth center. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, nothing that would draw attention to himself. As he walked down the street, he noticed a police car slowly cruising nearby. He didn't think much of it. Police officers were a common sight in the neighborhood. Suddenly, the car screeched to a halt. Two officers jumped out, their faces grim. "Sergeant Marcus Johnson," one of them barked, his voice sharp and demanding. Johnson, surprised, replied, "Yes, that's me." Without another word, the officers approached him. "You're under arrest," one of them said, grabbing his arm. Johnson was stunned. "Arrest? What for? What's going on?" he asked, confusion and disbelief clouding his face. The officers didn't answer. They roughly spun him around and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. The metal bit into his skin, a cold, hard reality. People stopped and stared, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Sergeant Johnson, a man who had faced down enemies on foreign soil, was now being treated like a common criminal on his own street. The charge, they mumbled, was suspicion of armed robbery. A robbery that had occurred just minutes before, a few blocks away. The description of the suspect? A black male, approximately 6 feet tall. A description that, unfortunately, fits Sergeant Johnson. But was that enough? The crowd that gathered was growing larger and more agitated. Some people recognized Sergeant Johnson and began to protest, shouting at the officers. "That's Sergeant Johnson. He's a hero. You've got the wrong guy." Others yelled, their voices laced with anger and disbelief. Johnson, despite the shock and humiliation, remained calm. He knew that resisting would only make the situation worse. He kept his voice steady. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job, but you've made a mistake. I'm a Marine. I've served this country. Can we please sort this out at the station?" But the officers were unmoved. They seemed determined to follow protocol, regardless of the growing unrest. They pushed Johnson towards the police car, ignoring the pleas and protests of the onlookers. A few people started recording the incident on their phones, capturing the scene for the world to see. The air crackled with tension. As they bundled him into the back of the car, Johnson couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if he wasn't black. Was he being judged solely on the color of his skin? The thought stung, a bitter pill to swallow. He had dedicated his life to serving and protecting, only to be treated like a criminal in his own community. The ride to the station was silent, filled only with Johnson's racing thoughts and the weight of the handcuffs on his wrists. The seed of doubt had been planted and it was beginning to grow. At the station, Sergeant Johnson was processed like any other suspect. He was fingerprinted, photographed, and his personal belongings were confiscated. The officers seemed indifferent to his pleas, treating him with cold, impersonal efficiency. He requested a phone call, hoping to reach his lawyer or someone who could vouch for his character. But his request was denied. He was led to a holding cell, a small, cramped space with a metal bench and a barred window. The air was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. Other inmates eyed him with suspicion. He sat down on the bench, his head in his hands, trying to make sense of what was happening. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The charges against him were read: armed robbery, resisting arrest, a charge Johnson vehemently denied as he had offered no resistance. The bail was set at an exorbitant amount, far beyond what he could afford. He felt isolated and alone, trapped in a system that seemed determined to railroad him. The initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a burning anger. How could this happen? How could a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country be treated with such disrespect? He knew he was innocent, but proving it seemed like an impossible task. As darkness fell, casting long shadows across the cell, Sergeant Johnson vowed to fight back. He wouldn't let this injustice stand. He would clear his name no matter what it took. The fight for his freedom had just begun. News of Sergeant Johnson's arrest spread like wildfire. The video footage taken by bystanders quickly went viral, sparking outrage and disbelief across social media. People who knew Johnson personally flooded the internet with messages of support, attesting to his character and integrity. The hashtag Justice for SGT Johnson began trending, becoming a rallying cry for those who believed in his innocence. But the arrest had already taken a heavy toll. Johnson's reputation, carefully built over years of service and community involvement, was now tarnished. His neighbors looked at him differently, some with suspicion, others with pity. The youth center where he volunteered suspended him pending the outcome of the investigation. The kids he mentored were confused and heartbroken. His family was devastated. His wife, Sarah, struggled to hold everything together, juggling work, childcare, and the emotional strain of her husband's incarceration. She spent sleepless nights worrying about his safety and well-being, and the financial burden of legal fees loomed large. The arrest also jeopardized Johnson's military career. He was placed on administrative leave, and his future in the Marines was uncertain. He had dedicated his life to the Corps, and the thought of losing it all because of a false accusation was unbearable. The incident cast a dark shadow over everything he had worked so hard to achieve, threatening to unravel his life completely. But even in the face of such adversity, Johnson refused to give up hope. He knew he had to fight not only for himself but for everyone who had ever been wrongly accused. The online outrage quickly translated into real-world action. Protests erupted outside the police station, with hundreds of people demanding Sergeant Johnson's release and calling for accountability. Community leaders organized marches and rallies, drawing attention to what they saw as a clear case of racial profiling and police misconduct. The local news media picked up the story, amplifying the voices of those who felt that Johnson had been wronged. Civil rights organizations joined the cause, providing legal support and advocating for a thorough investigation. The pressure on the police department began to mount. Social media became a battleground, with supporters of Johnson clashing with those who defended the officer's actions. The debate raged on, fueled by differing perspectives and deeply held beliefs. Some argued that the police were simply doing their job, while others insisted that Johnson had been targeted because of his race. Petitions circulated online, demanding that the charges against Johnson be dropped and that the officers involved be held accountable. Celebrities and influencers weighed in on the issue, further raising awareness and galvanizing support. The movement grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by a shared sense of injustice and a determination to see justice served. The community, both local and online, had united in defense of one of their own, refusing to let Sergeant Johnson's story be ignored. The fight for his freedom was now a collective effort, a testament to the power of community and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The courtroom was packed on the day of Sergeant Johnson's arraignment. Supporters filled the benches, their faces etched with hope and determination. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. Johnson, dressed in a sharp suit, stood tall and proud as he entered his plea, not guilty. His defense team, led by the experienced and passionate attorney Ms. Evans, argued that the arrest was based solely on a vague description and that there was no concrete evidence linking Johnson to the robbery. They presented character witnesses who testified to Johnson's impeccable reputation and his dedication to his community and country. They highlighted the lack of a proper lineup and questioned the reliability of the eyewitness testimony. The prosecution, on the other hand, maintained that the officers had acted within their rights and that Johnson fit the description of the suspect. They presented the eyewitness accounts and emphasized the need to uphold law and order. They painted a picture of Johnson as a potential threat to public safety despite his military service and community involvement. The challenge for the defense was proving Johnson's innocence beyond a reasonable doubt despite the lack of clear evidence. They had to overcome the inherent biases that might exist within the legal system and convince the jury that Johnson was a victim of mistaken identity and racial profiling. The legal battle was just beginning, and the road ahead was long and arduous. But Johnson and his team were determined to fight for justice, no matter the odds. The truth, they believed, would ultimately prevail. General Thompson, a highly respected three-star general in the Marine Corps, first learned about Sergeant Johnson's case through a news report that highlighted the community's outrage. Initially, he was skeptical, knowing that media reports could sometimes be sensationalized. However, something about the story resonated with him. He saw the video of the arrest and read accounts from people who knew Johnson, all painting a picture of a dedicated Marine and a valuable member of society. He decided to delve deeper. He contacted his staff and requested a full briefing on Sergeant Johnson's service record. What he discovered impressed him. Johnson was not only an exceptional sniper but also a decorated war hero with an exemplary record of conduct. The general was troubled by the thought that a Marine of Johnson's caliber could be treated in such a manner. Moreover, General Thompson had always been a staunch advocate for his troops, believing in the importance of standing by them, especially when they faced adversity. He felt a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that Johnson received a fair hearing and that his rights were protected. He couldn't stand idly by while one of his Marines was potentially being railroaded by the system. Beyond his concern for Johnson, General Thompson also recognized the potential damage this case could inflict on the Marine Corps' reputation. If it became known that a Marine had been unjustly arrested and mistreated, it could erode trust and morale within the ranks. He felt compelled to act, not only for Johnson's sake but for the integrity of the entire Marine Corps. He knew his involvement would be controversial, but he was prepared to face the consequences. He believed that doing what was right was always worth the risk. The day General Thompson walked into the courtroom, a hush fell over the room. It was as if time itself had stopped. He wasn't in uniform, but his presence commanded respect. His shoulders were broad, his gaze steady, and his bearing radiated authority. Word spread quickly through the room, "That's a general." The lawyers paused mid-sentence, the judge peered over his glasses, and the jurors shifted in their seats. Sergeant Johnson, who had been listening intently to the proceedings, looked up in surprise. He recognized the general instantly. A wave of emotion washed over him, disbelief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of hope. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew that something significant was about to happen. The tension was palpable. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, capturing every detail of the scene. The spectators craned their necks, eager to witness the unfolding drama. General Thompson walked deliberately to the front of the courtroom and requested to address the court. His voice, though calm and measured, resonated with power. He explained his reasons for being there, emphasizing his unwavering support for Sergeant Johnson and his belief in the principles of justice and fairness. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The impact of his presence was undeniable. It was a turning point in the case, a moment that would be remembered for years to come. The general's intervention had transformed the narrative, shifting the focus from suspicion and doubt to respect and admiration. He had brought a sense of gravitas to the proceedings, signaling that this was not just another case. It was a matter of honor and integrity. General Thompson addressed the court, his voice filled with sincerity. He looked directly at Sergeant Johnson. "Sergeant Johnson," he began, "on behalf of the United States Marine Corps, and as a representative of all those who wear the uniform, I offer you my deepest and most heartfelt apology." He continued, "You have served this country with honor and distinction. You have risked your life to protect our freedoms. The fact that you were subjected to such treatment is a stain on our justice system, and it is something that should never have happened." He then turned his attention to the community. To the people of this community, he said, "I want to assure you that the Marine Corps values diversity and respects the rights of all citizens. We do not condone racial profiling or any form of discrimination. We are committed to working with you to build a stronger and more just society." Finally, he addressed the court directly. "Your Honor," he stated, "I urge you to consider the evidence in this case carefully and to render a verdict that is consistent with the principles of justice and fairness. Sergeant Johnson is a man of integrity and character, and he deserves to be treated with the respect that he has earned." The general's words resonated deeply with everyone in the courtroom. His apology was not just a formality, it was a genuine expression of remorse and a commitment to righting a wrong. The impact of his statement was profound, shifting the momentum of the case and restoring hope to those who had begun to lose faith in the system. It was a moment of truth and reconciliation, a step towards healing the wounds of injustice. In the days following General Thompson's powerful statement, the prosecution's case began to crumble. The eyewitness testimony, already shaky, came under further scrutiny. New evidence surfaced that placed Sergeant Johnson miles away from the scene of the robbery at the time it occurred. The pressure from the community and the media continued to mount, making it increasingly difficult for the prosecution to justify pursuing the charges. Finally, the district attorney announced that all charges against Sergeant Marcus Johnson would be dropped. He cited inconsistencies in the evidence and the lack of a credible case as the reasons for the dismissal. While he stopped short of admitting any wrongdoing on the part of the police, the decision was widely seen as a victory for Johnson and his supporters. The news spread quickly, triggering celebrations in the community. People cheered, hugged, and wept with joy. The hashtag Justice for SGT Johnson exploded on social media with messages of relief and gratitude flooding the internet. For Sergeant Johnson, the dismissal of the charges meant more than just freedom. It meant the restoration of his reputation, the chance to rebuild his life, and the opportunity to continue serving his country with honor. It was a vindication of his character and a testament to the power of truth and justice. However, the scars of the experience would remain, a reminder of the injustice he had faced and the importance of fighting for what is right. He knew that his story was not unique and that many others faced similar challenges. He resolved to use his experience to advocate for police reform and to promote equality and justice for all. The fight was far from over, but for Sergeant Johnson, a new chapter had begun. When Sergeant Johnson heard the words "charges dismissed," a wave of emotions washed over him. Relief, gratitude, and a sense of vindication flooded his senses. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to absorb the reality of the situation. It was finally over. He looked at his wife, Sarah, who was beaming at him through tears of joy. He saw the faces of his supporters, their eyes filled with hope and pride. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for their unwavering belief in him. The apology from General Thompson had a profound impact on Johnson. It was more than just words, it was a recognition of the injustice he had suffered and a validation of his service to his country. It restored his faith in the Marine Corps and in the principles for which he had fought. However, the experience had also changed him. He was more aware of the racial biases that existed within the justice system and the challenges faced by marginalized communities. He was determined to use his platform to raise awareness and to advocate for change. He felt a responsibility to speak out against injustice and to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. The arrest had been a traumatic experience, but it had also ignited a fire within him. He was no longer just a Marine, he was an advocate, a voice for the voiceless, a champion for justice. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready to face it head-on. He had been through the fire, and he had emerged stronger and more determined than ever before. The fight for justice had just begun. Sergeant Johnson's story, while unique in its details, highlights several systemic issues that plague society. The most glaring is the issue of racial bias in law enforcement. Studies have shown that people of color are disproportionately targeted by police, often based on stereotypes and assumptions rather than concrete evidence. Johnson's case serves as a stark reminder of the potential for even decorated veterans to fall victim to this bias. Another critical issue is the treatment of veterans upon their return home. Many veterans struggle with mental health issues, substance abuse, and difficulty reintegrating into civilian life. They deserve support and respect, not suspicion and mistreatment. Johnson's case underscores the need for law enforcement to be trained to recognize and address the unique challenges faced by veterans. Furthermore, Johnson's story calls for meaningful police reform. This includes increased training on implicit bias, de-escalation techniques, and community policing. It also requires greater accountability for officers who engage in misconduct and a willingness to address systemic problems within police departments. Johnson's case is not just about one Marine, it's about a larger pattern of injustice and inequality that needs to be addressed. It's a call to action to create a more just and equitable society for all, where everyone is treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or background. It's a reminder that the fight for justice is a continuous process and that we all have a role to play in making a difference. The system failed Sergeant Johnson, and that failure demands change. Even with the charges dropped and his name cleared, the shadow of the incident lingered over Sergeant Johnson's life. The experience left deep emotional scars, affecting his trust in authority and his sense of security. He found himself constantly second-guessing situations, wondering if he was being judged or perceived differently because of his race. His career in the Marine Corps was forever altered. While he was eventually reinstated, the incident had created a level of scrutiny and unease that made it difficult for him to advance. He felt that he was being watched more closely and opportunities that might have been open to him before were now closed off. His faith in the justice system was shaken. He had always believed in the principles of fairness and equality, but his experience had revealed a darker side of the system, one where bias and prejudice could trump justice. It took time for him to reconcile his ideals with the reality he had faced. The impact on his family was also significant. His wife, Sarah, continued to struggle with the emotional trauma of the arrest, and their children were deeply affected by the experience. They had to learn to navigate a world where their father, a hero in their eyes, had been wrongly accused and treated like a criminal. Despite these challenges, Sergeant Johnson refused to be defined by the incident. He used his experience as a catalyst for change, dedicating himself to advocating for justice and equality. He became a mentor and a role model for young people, sharing his story and inspiring them to stand up for what is right. The scars remained, but they served as a reminder of the importance of perseverance and the enduring power of hope. In the wake of Sergeant Johnson's case, several positive changes began to emerge. The police department implemented new training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, implicit bias awareness, and community relations. These programs aim to equip officers with the skills and knowledge necessary to interact with diverse communities in a respectful and equitable manner. The City Council established a civilian oversight committee to review police policies and procedures, and to provide a platform for community input. This committee was tasked with ensuring that the police department was accountable to the people it served and that its policies were fair and just. Several community initiatives were launched to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the communities they policed. These initiatives included neighborhood meetings, youth outreach programs, and partnerships with local organizations. The goal was to foster trust and understanding between officers and residents, creating a safer and more cohesive community. General Thompson, inspired by Sergeant Johnson's resilience and commitment to justice, spearheaded a Marine Corps initiative to support veterans transitioning back into civilian life. This initiative provided resources for mental health care, job training, and housing assistance, ensuring that veterans received the support they needed to succeed. Sergeant Johnson himself became a leading voice for police reform and veterans' rights, speaking at community events, participating in panel discussions, and advocating for policy changes at the local and national levels. His story became a symbol of hope and a catalyst for change, inspiring others to stand up for what is right and to demand a more just and equitable society. The seeds of change had been planted, and they were beginning to sprout. Sergeant Marcus Johnson's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope. It is a story that reminds us that even in the face of adversity, we can overcome challenges and emerge stronger than before. It is a story that inspires us to believe in the possibility of a more just and equitable world. But the journey is far from over. Systemic issues continue to plague our society, and the fight for justice remains an ongoing struggle. We must continue to engage in open and honest dialogue about race, bias, and inequality. We must hold our leaders accountable and demand meaningful change. We must support community initiatives that promote understanding and collaboration between law enforcement and the communities they serve. We must invest in programs that provide resources and opportunities for marginalized communities. We must empower young people to become agents of change and to stand up for what is right. Let Sergeant Johnson's story be a call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a better future. Let us work together to build a society where everyone is treated with respect and dignity, where justice prevails, and where hope endures. The path forward requires courage, commitment, and collaboration. But by working together, we can create a world where stories like Sergeant Johnson's are no longer the norm, but a distant memory of a time when justice was not blind and equality was not a reality for all. The time for change is now. Let us answer the call and build a brighter future for generations to come.